Wednesday. So sorry, I'm a little. So live is live, and right before I was going to go live, I took a drink. Well, tried to take a drink and did not realize that this can was still as full as it was. So I now have my drink all over my jeans. So they will definitely need to be washed. But such is life. I hope you guys are having a great night. I am just feeling it tonight. Hi, Haley. So I'm kind of half listening for the mailman because I think we talked about this last week, but it should be coming today is my advanced reader's copy of What Big Lies You Have. And I cannot wait to read it. And I was hoping to do an unboxing for you guys so that you could like see even closer up what the cover looks like, because it's so cool. And AG's followers are the ones that chose the cover. So that if you ever wonder, you know, do I have any? Turby is helping watch. Who's Turby? I might need a picture. What's a Turby? I'm confused. Okay. I don't know what the comments you guys can see because I've not watched it from the other way. So, yeah. But anyway, back on it. Yeah, if you've ever been like, you know, I don't know if like voting makes a difference, to small YouTubers, smaller channels, it actually does. There's a new thing that somebody that I follow has been talking about that you can do. Over on your right, I believe, below the video, in the three dots, there should be like a new feature that says hype. So after you have liked and subscribed and shared, because you guys are awesome and I know that you're doing that for me, can you hit the hype button? I want to see if it works. Because I'm going to talk about it on the Hearth tomorrow night, which is going to be awesome. But so we have the full moon behind us tonight because we have a full moon tonight. We have the buck moon, which, yeah. And then, so we're like right in the middle of that. So we got 3 days of moon magic. And then Saturday is Lunasa, which I love Lunasa. It's a harvest festival, or at least I celebrate it as a harvest festival, because everything is like, it's the early harvest. So berries are time for lunacy. That's right. Absolutely. It's one of my favorites. It's, you know, if you want to look at it from a more layman's, I guess, midsummer, because we are at the halfway point between the solstice and the equinox. So, yeah, a little bit of my left-handed weirdness for you guys tonight. I'm sorry. I know not all of my folks here are the same folks that are on Thursdays, but it feels like a very magical week. So, and I'm going to be kind of all over the place again. So we're here tonight. We're on the Hearth tomorrow. I may do an extra live tomorrow. Feeling a little froggy, feeling like maybe making some extra content this week. And then Friday night, I know you guys, some of you guys really want to see what's happening in Yellow Springs, because if you follow what's been happening, some folks have been spending some money in Yellow Springs, and Tim Gabbard and the Hitmen. So Todd the Fox Music, who's usually here with us on Wednesdays, is doing sound for another band tonight, which is why he's not here with us right now, but hopefully he'll be able to jump on for a little bit before we wrap up tonight. But he's going to be playing with Tim and the Hitmen at the Trailtown Brewing, I believe is the name of it, in Yellow Springs Friday night from 7:30 to 9:30. So I'm going to be scooting. Sorry, a little message in the corner of my computer. Yeah, so we're going to be hanging out there Friday night, and it's supposed to be really nice. And so hopefully they will be outside doing their thing, playing some Americana and some folk and some kind of all over stuffs. You get to see Greg Schultz, the Conga Ninja himself. And as I say, Todd the Fox, Aaron Gabbard, Tim Gabbard, Steve McCofka, Daniel Cook, so Jazzy. They'll all be there. I'll be there. And I mean, honestly, come and hang out with me. It's going to be great. He did. He was able to jump in. Hey, Todd the Fox Music. Hello. Yeah, we were just talking about you and telling people they need to come and see you Friday night. So, and then what is coming up then on the 8th, I'm going to be on set with Heidi McCack for Written in the Dark. The crowdfunder for that goes live on Saturday, so you guys will see posts for that. Oh. Dayton Porch Fest is coming up in August, which is like super, super fun if you guys have never been to a Porch Fest or something like it. I think Muncie had something like it about a month ago. Or maybe there's this coming up in a month. I'm not sure. I know I saw something about it. But they're calling it something else. But Porch Fest is awesome. So people volunteer their porches or their yards for live music for the day. And these bands enter, apply, whatever, get chosen. And so Todd the Fox will be playing at 6 o'clock. That is August 22nd. And you guys should check out their Facebook or their website, I think is just DaytonPorchFest.org, I believe. Check out the lineup, check out what parking is going to look like. It's such a fun day to get to walk around this neighborhood and these neighborhoods and just listen to the different music coming from each home. So it's a lot of fun. This will be my third year. This will be my third summer at Porch Fest. That's awesome. But anyway, that is enough of my rambly update. But I get really excited when I have stuff to share with you guys that is coming up that I'm able to share. Some stuff is happening behind the scenes, but stuff is always happening behind the scenes. So tonight, we're going to read some more Terry Pratchett because I really enjoyed this last week. And I hope you guys did too. Our little Christmas in July. That was a lot of fun for me. So thank you for indulging in my whimsy once again. But you guys are good for that. And I appreciate you so much. So tonight we are going to start with The Quest for the Keys. Far away and long ago, when dragons still existed and the only arcade game was ping pong in black and white, a wizard cautiously entered a smoky tavern in the evil, ancient, foggy city of Moorpork and sidled up to the bar. Wizards aren't generally welcome in pubs. They tend to score 190 at darts. I'm looking for a hired sword, this one said to the innkeeper. Huh? Said the innkeeper. Someone who can brave unimaginable terrors, fight nameless monsters, the usual stuff? The very same, yes, said the wizard. The bloke in the corner might be your man. The wizard looked around. Sitting on a bench by the fire was a young man with the shoulders of an ox, an honest face, and the sort of impractical leather clothes that no true adventurer would be seen dead out of. "I reckon he's tough, then," said the wizard. "Well, he's just eaten 15 bags of pork scratchings, a bucket of cheese, and smoky dragon-flavored crisps, 10 pickled eggs, and an old individual meat pie I was using as a paperweight," said the innkeeper. "Good grief," said the wizard. "Then just give me a pint of inexpensive ale and a small lemonade with a cherry in it, please." "I won't beat around the bush," he said, sitting down next to the big man. "My name is Grubble the Utterly Untrustworthy, and I'm looking for a hero." The man extended a hand like a bunch of bananas. "That's me," he said. "I'm called Kron." His mighty brows furrowed and his lips moved silently. "Yeah, I'm sure that's right," he said uncertainly. "Yeah, Kron." "Well, Kron, I just happen to have found out the whereabouts of the 5 keys of Zag. What do you think of that, then?" Kron's expression did not change. "I expect that's very nice for you," he said. No, 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 no," said Grubble sharply. "You don't say that. You say, 'Not the 5 keys of Zag, whose fabulous treasure has been seen by no man for 1,000 years. Gosh, how marvelous! Let me help you in your quest, O wizard, in exchange for not more than 20% of the treasure less expenses. When do I start?" "Okay," said Kron. "I wasn't doing much today anyway." "We'll have to hurry," said Grubble. "The first one shouldn't be too tricky. It's kept by an old witch who can only do food spells. Should be, a piece of cake." "Seems fair enough," said Kron. "When do I start?" "Gondropstiptrel!" shouted the wizard. Kron vanished so suddenly that there was a small thunderclap. "Can't let him ask too many questions," said Grobble to himself as he hurried from the inn. "He'll just have to do what he's best at, and I'll do what I'm best at, which will probably involve swindling him out of his share of the treasure, if he ever finds it. Shouldn't be too difficult. He seems a bit of a lightweight in the head department." "Hang on," said Kron. "There's 1 or 2 questions I'd like." He was alone, in the middle of a forest. It was immediately obvious that it was the sort of forest where even the monsters went around in pairs, for safety. Huge, gnarled, and sinister-looking trees loomed off in all directions. "Hi, sister." If there was a map of the forest, it would have been entirely green, with a little dot right in the middle of it and an arrow telling Kron, "You are here, but not for very long, probably." Uh-oh. He drew his sword and looked around carefully. At about that moment, someone shouted, "Duck!" Now, in a situation like that, the average person does the obvious thing, i.e., stand still with their mouth open, looking gormless. But Kron tumbled forward just as a spear whistled over his head and struck, vibrating like a tuning fork, in a tree. Something cackled and disappeared among the bushes. "What was that?" said Kron out loud. "Well, that depends on what you mean by that," said a voice by his ear. It was rather wooden, hollow voice. It went on, "By the way, would you mind taking the spear out of the tree for me?" "Oh, not for me. Excuse me, I misread that completely, and it's very important." It went on, "By the way, would you mind taking the spear out of me?" Out of me. Kron looked up into a large oak tree. What was more unusual was that the oak tree looked back. You're a tree, said Tron. The tree groaned. Yes, it said. Some people would say that the roots, branches, general bark like covering, and of course, all these leaves all over the place are a dead giveaway, but yes, since you ask, I am a tree. Did Grubble send you? How did you know that? The tree shrugged, which was quite an impressive sight. Another idiot treasure hunter, it said. That makes 3 this week. It doesn't work, you know. The witch knows where he materializes them and just waits here and spears them or puts a spell on them or whatever. He never said anything about that, said Kron. He wouldn't, would he? Said the tree. I mean, saying step this way, certain death guaranteed, doesn't attract volunteers, does it? Kron looked at the spear. I've survived so far, he said. Where does this witch live? About a mile away, said the tree. I'll help you get there if you want. Sure, said Kron. A breech creaked down toward him. Hop on, said the tree. It was a jerky way to travel, but fast. The oak tree swung around slowly and dropped Kron gently into the waiting branches of a nearby ash tree, which passed him on to a handy beach. The ground swayed and moved a long way below him. Be careful, said a chestnut tree as it handed him on. The witch has got this dog, you see. The witch certainly did have a dog. She obviously hadn't heard that she ought to have a cat. It had 2 heads and was almost as tall as Kron. He'd have to do something about it if he wanted to get to the witch's cottage, which was quite unlike anything he'd ever seen before. A few bones and odd bits of armor around the clearing suggested that other people had also tried. The dog didn't look very friendly. It did look hungry. Kron, from a handy bush, watched it for a while and looked at his spear. It didn't look anything like enough to... He had an idea. The assembled trees watched in horror as Kron stepped out from the bush, snapped the spear across his knee, and stood grinning with half a spear in either hand. He's gone totally mad, muttered a holly bush. Here, boy, called Kron. The 2-headed dog wasn't used to this sort of thing. It came across the clearing at a lumbering run, both heads dribbling horribly and straining to be the first one to bite him. Then Kron threw the spear away. Mad, said a beech tree. Doomed, too. The 2-headed dog thundered toward Kron. So he threw the 2 halves of his spear in opposite directions and shouted, Fetch! There was a long moment as the dog hung in the air with its heads trying to take the body after each bit of spear. Then the heads snapped back, knocked into each other, and the dog rolled over, out cold. Kron scampered toward the witch's cottage and flung himself against a wall, which was made of gingerbread. The whole place was made of gingerbread. Here and there, of course, whoever had built it had to use other things, like, for example, all sorts of licorice on the chimney and the chocolate doorsteps. But by and large, it was certainly gingerbread. There was a candy floss door knocker, and the door handle felt sticky. Toffee, Kron realized. He couldn't let go, and the door was opening. The toffee doorknob trick gets him every time, cackled the witch, herding Kron into her kitchen. That rat-bag old wizard never gives up. Kron's arms were pinned to his side by a very large donut. The kitchen was big and smelled rather sweet, as might be expected in a cottage belonging to a witch who could only do high carbohydrate spells. High carbohydrate spells? Yes, please. There were several cages against one wall, and Kron was pushed into one of them. They say I should move with the times, the witch muttered. They say I should do this place up, get rid of all the sweet stuff, do the whole thing over with brown bread and yogurt, as if anyone ever heard of a whole food cottage. Yeah, ridiculous, agreed Kron. I don't know. You rot people's teeth, steal their kids, make them all spotty, and then suddenly they turn against you for no reason at all, said the witch. You're a big lad anyway. Couple of weeks eating on you, I shouldn't wonder, after you've been fattened up a bit. You eat people? Asked Kron. It's traditional, said the witch. It goes with the job. She hobbled out of the room, leaving Kron to look around. There was a key hanging over the big oven. The key of Zag? There was also a very small and ugly troll in the next cage. Ah, man, said the troll wearily. Been here long? Said Kron. Ages, man, said the troll. Don't seem to put on weight. She'd feed me decent slugs or toads, it'd be fine. I can't stand all the sweet stuff. I'd eat my way out of here tomorrow if I could abide the taste of licorice. Kron looked at the cage bars. They were thick and black, he already knew, but they were also sticky. With every muscle twinging like an elastic band, Kron broke free of his donut and attacked the licorice bars with his teeth. The troll watched with interest. By the time the witch came back, Kron had eaten through 3 bars and was feeling sick. She gave a screech, but even as she waved a hand and materialized a mass of marshmallow over his head, he squeezed forward and was free. Hey, man, don't forget me, said the troll. The old complexion isn't getting any better here. At that moment, the gingerbread door burst in, and the witch's 2-headed dog leaped at Kron, both heads growling. He hit it as hard as he could, grabbed his sword from the table, cut through several of the troll's bars, snatched the key from its hook, and ducked as the witch sent a stream of razor-sharp barley sugars scrying through the air. Hey, wow, dog, said the troll squeezing out of its cage. Anybody got any mustard? The monster dog bit on both legs, which, since troll skin is tougher than leather, wasn't a particularly good idea. The troll bit back. A second later, both were gone, with the sounds of distant yelping and the troll shouting for salt and pepper. The witch had gone too. Kron kicked his way through a wall in time to see her broomstick hurtling away over the trees. Kron held the key over his head. Okay, Grubble, he said. I've got the key. Do your stuff. He vanished. Kron winked into existence in the middle of a pile of what felt like cardboard boxes. He pushed at them and heard Grubble's muffled voice. Oi! It's quality merchandise. Light streamed in as the wizard moved some of the boxes out of the way and helped Kron climb out. He was in a cave, which had a few moth-eaten magical implements in it, but was mostly full of cardboard boxes. Got the key, said Grubble, and snatched it out of Kron's hand. Fine, super, great. Now, your next quest, I want you to... Oh, I think somebody's spamming me. Sorry, guys. I don't know if you can hear that, but we'll just... Sorry, I'm not here right now. Okay, hang on, said Kron quickly. We ought to have a talk. No time, said Grubble. I've got to shift all this lot. Kron looked at the boxes. What are they? Lucky Charms, said Grubble. Got them cheap on account of the manufacturer being struck by lightning. Real bargains. Genuine solid brass plating. Only 3 gold pieces each to you. All right, 2. Okay, 1. But I'm cutting my own throat. Tell you what I'll do. Tell you what I'll do. I'll throw in 1 totally genuine love potion with every 3 charms sold. Can't say fairer than that, can I? You just did, said Kron. All this magic to move you around is costing me a packet, moaned the wizard. Come on, buy a couple. They're only slightly tarnished where they were in the mystery flood that happened after the fire. You'd hardly notice. No, said Kron. Look, I'm not all that happy about these quests. Looks like I'm taking a lot of risks. Hardly any, said Grubble. Not worth talking about, really. Now, if you'll just stand in this magic circle here. Yes, said Kron, who was beginning to think he'd lost a grip on the conversation. But, scores, Grubble, said Grubble. Kron vanished. There were 1 or 2 things about Kron that the wizard ought to have found out. While Kron was quite bright for a hero, he couldn't tell north from south and always got them confused. He was okay with east and west, and up and down. And that didn't give him a lot of trouble either. He zapped into existence in broad daylight in a rocky landscape, which was freezing cold even though steam gushed up from holes in the ground. That wasn't very polite, he said. Still, now I'm here, I better have a look around. Let's see. There's a cave behind me, due south. And that's a big volcano up there. I think I'll take a look at that funny stone near it. It was a tall rock with the mystifying words, "It snort and that's HO''ME carved on it. Who or what is it snort Kron said out loud. There was a groan from behind the rock. Drawing his sword, Kron went to investigate. On the ground, totally tied up, was a very small man. Help, help, the small man suggested. Hold on a moment, said Kron, and took out his adventurer's pocket guide to mythical creatures, which honestly everyone should have. And if such a thing exists and someone wants to send it to me, oh my lord, that would be awesome. He said, very small, got a beard. Could be a goblin? No, wrong color hat. Dwarf? That's interesting. It says here that dwarfs always tell lies in the afternoon and hate personal remarks. Elf? No, beard's too long. When you're quite finished, said the little man, I'm a gnome. Set me free and I'll tell you what the rock means. Well, said Kron after he had untied the gnome. It points the way if you read it right, said the little man. The dwarfs put it here as a marker. They also attacked me and tied me up because they thought I was looking for one of the keys, which they have hidden. Were you? Who, me? Said the gnome guiltily. All I know about is that it is not under the ice, whatever that means. Kron hurried off down the road, and the gnome watched him go south. When Kron came to a fork in the road, he tossed a coin to decide which way to go. Then he ran across a bridge, but did not take the next turning, which he could see led to a steaming lake. At the next turning, he headed for a very rickety bridge, where there was a small black book. Ooh, that is dangerous. When Kron picked up the book, it said, if you think you're heading west, then I'll tell you the key isn't on land. If you think you're heading east, then I'll tell you the key isn't in the water. If you think you're going north of the pointy hills, then I'll tell you the key is west of the pointy hills. And shall I tell you something for nothing? What's that? What's that? Said Kron. You've got mud all over your boots. Kron looked down. His boots were filthy. 50 gold pieces a pair these cost me, he moaned. You just can't get mud off hush dragons. But he sat down on a nearby rock to try. This turned out to be the wrong thing to do for two reasons. One, he caught a slight chill from the cold stone. And two, the party of dwarfs that had been watching him from behind the rock took the opportunity to hit him very hard indeed. When Kron woke up, he was heavily bound with dwarf ropes and lying in one of the many caves that riddled the hills in the area. He could see dwarfish writing on the walls. This must be their camp, he thought. He also noticed about 17 other things. 16 of them were dwarfs. None of them were more than 2 feet high. The other was a very ornate clock, which the dwarfs were watching carefully. The hands were pointing to 1 minute to 12. Oh dear, said Kron loudly. This is going to be very embarrassing. He's woked up, shouted a dwarf. The reason it's going to be embarrassing, said Kron, standing up and snapping all of the ropes, is that dwarfs make very bad ropes. But if it gets about that I fought a lot of dwarfs, I'll get laughed out of the Heroes Union. Oh, why? Said the head dwarf. Well, said Kron, you've got to admit you're all a bit lacking in the inches department. Get him, lads, shouted the head dwarf. Nut him in the kneecaps. Kron ignored the little men who were kicking him on the ankle, but managed to pick up the head dwarf by his belt and held him at arm's length while he struggled. I don't normally attack people smaller than me, he said, but I'll make an exception in your case, unless you tell me where you've hidden the key. I'll tell you 2 things, said the dwarf sulkily. Key is in a cave. Boom, said the clock 12 times, and Kron said, Fancy that. It's the afternoon already. And it is east of the 6 standing stones, finished the dwarf triumphantly. Kron thought for a moment. I don't need to know anymore, he said. I know where the key is. As soon as Kron laid hands on the second key of Zag, Grubble the wizard's magic took hold and flipped him back to the cave. At least, Kron hoped it was the cave. All the cardboard boxes had gone, but there was a lot of glass pipework and bubbling jars and steam. Nasty colored liquids jerked along corkscrew pipes and dripped into bottles. And at the end of it all, Grubble, the utterly untrustworthy, was sitting with a pile of sticky labels in a funnel. What happened to the Lucky Charm business? Said Kron. Traded them with Scrobbleblast the Devious for all this stuff, said the wizard, licking a label and sticking it onto a full bottle of horrible blue stuff. What are you making then? Magic potions, said the wizard, pointing to a half dozen crates of bottles, all corked and labeled. Excuse me. What sort? Well, said Grubble, pointing to a stack of labels, what sort would you like? Kron picked up a handful of labels. What's this? He said. Love potion, strength potion, anti-Welsh television ointment, flying potion, all on the same stuff. And it says here, guaranteed 100% artificial additives. It's just a load of rubbish. How can you call it magic? Absolutely true description, said Grubble shiftily. People are paying 5 gold pieces a bottle for stuff like this. And if that isn't magic, I don't know what is. Got the key, have you? Kron handed it over reluctantly. These adventures, he began, they're a bit risky, and I want to have a talk about how much I'm going to be What? You don't trust me? Said Grubble. That's shocking, that is. It's not that I don't actually trust you, said Kron. It's more that I sort of, well, don't trust you at all, to tell the truth. Threepsnance! Shouted the wizard. Kron vanished. Grubble looked at the 2 keys. 3 to go, he muttered, and then I'll be as rich as creosote. Kron reappeared standing on a narrow, ice-covered ledge, several thousand feet up a sheer cliff, during a blizzard. Oh, great, he muttered. Really first class. Marvelous. How am I supposed to get out of this? He tried not to look down and sidled along the ledge, which, just to make things more interesting, slanted outwards from the cliff and was getting covered with wet, slippery snow. Icy water began to trickle down his neck. I say, excuse me, please, said a voice behind him. Kron turned his head gingerly and saw a very small, bald man standing on the ledge. He wore a black robe and was barefoot. But what was more surprising was that he had a large red rubber nose attached to his face by elastic knotted around his ears. In fact, this is standard dress for a joke monk, but Kron wasn't to know that. Excuse me, please, Boom Boom. Kindly leave the ledge, said the mug in a sing-song voice. I say. You must be joking, said Kron weakly. Yes, must be joking, so please do stand aside, Boom Boom, said the monk. When Kron stayed put, the monk shrugged, walked around him so easily that Kron was sure the little man had taken several steps on empty air, and ran along the ledge. Kron swallowed. Well, if he can do that, so can I, he thought. But he didn't believe himself. By the time Kron reached the end of the ledge, the blizzard had stopped and the sun was out. He could see high mountains covered with snow and gleaming glaciers stretching into the distance. Since they were all nearly a long way below him, this was no help. The joke monk was a distant dot on a wide snowfield that was cupped in a hollow of the mountain. Kron followed him as best he could, sinking knee-deep in the snow at every step. Finally, the monk disappeared between 2 tall rocks. When Kron reached them, he found himself looking down into a narrow valley full of gardens and trees, hidden from the outside world by the high mountains. Beautiful. The little monk was talking to 2 guards who blocked the path. They were so big and muscular, their arms looked like 2 sacks of melons. My dog got no nose, the little monk chanted. How does he smell? Asked one of the guards. Terrible, Boom Boom, said the little monk. Do not wish to know that. Kindly go on down the path, said the guard, standing aside. Jokes, muttered Kron, who was hiding behind one of the rocks. They live up here and tell jokes. Well, anything was better than freezing to death. He stepped out and walked up to the guards, who barred his way with their spears. And he tried to think of a joke. Said Kron. The 2 guards watched him. What do you call a dog that is magic? He said. What you call him, said one of the guards. A labracadabrador, said Kron nervously. Boom, boom. The guards looked at each other. All right, said Kron. Do you know the one about the man who made a run for it? How'd that go? Said a guard. Like this, said Kron. He sped on down the zigzag path until the surprised guards were left far behind. And when he stopped for breath, he could see the whole valley spread out in front of him. There were little monks tending to gardens and herding goats, and every monk had a large red rubber nose held on with elastic. Even the big monastery at the head of the valley had a large, red, round roof. Finally, Kron caught up with the monk he was following. Where is this place? He asked. The little monk grinned at him. This place, Lost Valley of Shangri-Larf, boom boom. You come be joke monk, all day long tell joke. Become big monk like Alec Guinness, only not so well paid. Actually, I was looking for the key, Kron began. The little monk grabbed his arm. You come see High Lama, he said firmly. Boom boom. Kron was led into the monastery, and into the presence of the High Lama, who sat on possibly the only throne in the world with a built-in whoopee cushion. He wore a fez, and in addition to the red nose that all the monks had, also wore a pair of plastic spectacles with false eyebrows. Here in Shangri-Larf, we find amazing secret of living for a long time, said the Lama. For example, I am 200 years old. We tell jokes all day, everyone keep happy, live long time, continued the Lama. Also, prophecy says when all jokes in the world have been told 9 billion times, whole world come to end. Just like that, and everyone allowed to go home. That's fine by me, said Kron. I was actually looking for the key of Zag. We have it in Treasure House, said the Lama. Prophecy says it be given to first man who tell us joke we haven't heard before. Boom boom. Oh, I expect I can do that, said Kron. Good, said the Lama. Because prophecy also say, well, you know when comic on stage, he tell joke and audience know like he is said to die. Where you come from is just figure of speech. Up here, joke no make us laugh. We don't mess about. Boom, boom. Kron suddenly became very aware of all the guards in the hall. They all wore red noses, but the spears and swords they carried were no laughing matter. When you say you don't mess about, he said, what do you mean? Joke no make us laugh? We hit comic in face with traditional 1,000-year-old custard pie. Oh, that's a relief. Then we throw him off cliff and have a good laugh. Kron was led into a little room deep in the heart of the monastery, where one of the monks was waiting for him, holding out a red nose. Stranger must wear a ceremonial costume, he said. Then a gong sounded, and guards escorted both of them to a courtyard where thousands of joke monks were waiting expectantly. On a stage, one monk was telling jokes. 1,450,000 was telling jokes. 1,456,098, he shouted, and all the monks laughed. And 45,875,449, he cried, and they all cheered. And 87,076, he sniggered, and they all clapped. What's all this? Said Kron, muffled by the nose. We heard all jokes so many times, easier to give each joke number, said the High Lama. Monks hear number, think of joke, all laughing, boom, boom, efficiency. He pushed Kron forward. You on. Kron shuffled out onto the stage, and a small orchestra struck up a tune which sounded like a handful of steel bars falling through a fire escape. The huge crowd of joke monks waited expectantly. Not for the joke, probably, but to see Kron hit in the face by the ceremonial 1,000-year-old custard pie, which was being held by 2 guards. Said Kron. The custard pie smelled really awful, and had a stale crust that was razor sharp. He thought, all jokes have numbers. 199,874,390, he shouted. There was silence. Then one monk began to snigger. Then another moment later, the crowd was falling about with laughter. They hadn't heard that one before. Kron didn't waste time. He grabbed the high llama and pulled his red rubber nose out as far as the elastic would stretch. Give me the keys, he growled, or I'll nail you both nose. No problem, said the llama, who was shaking with laughter. You're welcome. Very funny joke. How you think 'em up? There's famous key of Zag, and a special treat, you get to eat traditional custard pie. Kron didn't feel hungry. He grabbed the key and ran with the guards after him. He didn't stop at the entrance to the valley. In fact, he didn't stop when it came to the cliff. He jumped. Grubble, do your stuff, he screamed. There was the usual blinding flash of light, and Kron found himself lying on the floor of Grubble's cave. The wizard was working at a table covered with papers and didn't look up. Everything okay, was all he said. No problems. Kron tore off the rubber nose and baggy trousers. Lots, he said, but it isn't worth me telling you, because as soon as I complain, you just say a magic word and I end up in something even worse. He flung the third key of Zag onto the table, disturbing piles of paper covered with complicated magical calculations. Ta, said Grubble. What's 8 times 3? 888, said Kron. Sure? Doesn't look right. Kron peered over the wizard's shoulder. He was drawing shaky red lines on a chart covered with strange symbols. What's all this about? He asked. The 4th key was hidden in time and space, said Grubble wearily. Very tricky, trying to work out the magic to get you there. Trumblight, said Grubble, and nothing happened. Obviously needed more bias in the nether areas, he muttered. Troblode! Purple sparks flashed out of Kron's ears. Green light flickered around his head, and he began to wobble slightly. Hang on, almost got it. Tribliffin! Kron vanished. Grubble picked up the 3 keys. Only 2 to go, he gloated. 888. Still doesn't sound right. Kron spun helplessly in space. This wasn't like the normal magic. The darkness was full of horrible noises and blinding flashes of light. Sorry, guys. I was trying to see how much longer this is. It might be kind of long. I hope you're enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. Finally, it stopped. There was a last blue flash, and he was sitting in dusty darkness and something small and crowded and smelling of what? Furniture polish? He reached out carefully and touched a wooden stick, which fell all over with a clatter. Then something smooth and snake-like dropped. Sorry. Moment. Bear with. Then something smooth and snake-like dropped over his neck. With a scream, Kron drew his sword and hacked madly at the blackness. No. He tried to back away in the cramped space and bumped into a door that swung open. He fell through backwards, followed by a clutter of tins, brushes, old boots, and the snake monster. Oh, sorry, guys. He gave it a few more wallops with the sword to make sure it was dead, and hurried down the passage into a dimly lit room that seemed to be mainly white boxes. His heart pounding, Kron pulled cautiously at the handle on the nearest one and found the box full of winter. The box was freezing cold, and someone had been stupid enough to put food in it. There was nearly a whole roast chicken, for example. Kron decided to really investigate the chicken thoroughly. While he chewed, he patted cautiously around the room. There was a big black box thing with knobs on the front. When Kron prodded at them, rings on top of the box glowed red. Oh, he's in the kitchen. There was a big metal basin with a couple of spiky things on the back of it. Kron couldn't quite see how they worked, so he hit them with the end of his sword until one broke off and sent a fountain of water spurting across the room. Kron backed away and looked at a smaller box with more knobs on it. He poked at them, and the room was suddenly full of noise, howling and screaming around while Kron desperately poked again at the knobs. This just caused different sorts of noise, and even the sound of people talking. Demons, he thought, and people trapped in little boxes by wizardry. He brought down his sword hard, and the box flew apart in a shower of sparks. There weren't even any very small people inside. And then Kron heard a voice behind him, and the room was flooded with light. Mom? Mom? There's a man with a sword in the kitchen, and he just killed the radio. Yeah, you haven't half made a mess of our vacuum cleaner, said a very small boy in blue pajamas who was standing in the doorway. You haven't come out of a flying saucer, have you? Like in that film, you know? Bing bong, bing bang bong. Kron backed away hastily from the little maniac and unfortunately put his hand down on top of the hot stove. You're even uglier than E.T., said the boy conversationally. Ah! Kron screamed and stepped backward into the washing machine, which started to churn and rumble. Finally, in sheer terror, he vaulted onto the sink and dived out through the window. He was vaguely aware of shouts behind him as he pounded across some grass and jumped a fence. But there was worse to come. Oh no, it's in our timeline. For example, the street was very small, with little suns on poles, and what could only be a dragon was roaring toward him. That was a relief at last. Kron knew about dragons. This one was a funny shape and had 2 glowing eyes, but it was a dragon all right. He stepped out in front of it and drew his sword. There was a nasty squealing sound and a roar of hot breath as the dragon slowed down. And when it was almost upon him, Kron struck. Kron's sword hit the dragon right between its glowing eyes. It was quite effective. There was a gush of steam and the eyes went out. A small voice behind him said, "You've done it now, killing that Lori." Kron looked around. The little boy, who had put on a dressing gown over his pajamas, was standing on the pavement watching with interest. A door opened in the side of the dragon, and a small but very angry man got out. "My mom's called the police," said the little boy. "Why haven't you got green skin like the incredible what's-his-name?" The lorry driver was rolling up his sleeves. Kron's sword was stuck fast. He ran for it. He didn't stop until he was several streets away. "Grubble," he muttered under his breath. "If I ever get it out of this mad place, I'll twist your horrible head off." Smaller dragons were roaring up and down the road. A big one flew overhead, flashing lights and growling. There were lights and noises everywhere. Kron felt lost, helpless, alone, and very, very hungry. Kron sniffed. There was a strange smell in the air. Tangy and tasty, mouth-watering, quite unlike anything he'd ever come across. Across the dark street, he could see a sign, magically glowing. He could read it, but he couldn't understand it. It said, "Fish and chips to take away." Kron had never heard of a fish and chip, but he plucked up courage and went on. The sight of a 7-foot man wearing leather and furs and dribbling a bit rather upset the shop owner, but not a lot, because he was already far more upset by another man in the shop who was pointing a gun at him and rummaging in the till. The man swung round and pointed the little black metal thing at Kron, who looked at it blankly. This man was trying to stop him getting at the lovely smell. Kron walloped him. There was a cheer, and lots of people crawled out from under the tables where they'd been hiding. Kron ignored them and banged on the counter. "Fish and chip," he demanded. "Better give it to him," said a little voice behind him proudly. "He's a master of the universe or something." Kron looked down, knowing what he was going to see. The little boy added, "Add a cod and double chips for me too, please." "He can have everything he can eat," said the chip shop man. Oh no, as Kron was surrounded by customers who were standing on tiptoe trying to slap him on the back. The would-be robber was out cold. Kron sat down and worked his way through piles of cod in place, a vat of mushy peas, every sausage in the place, and enough chips to build a rather greasy model of St. Paul's Cathedral. The small boy in the dressing gown sat opposite him, beaming proudly. He'd obviously adopted Kron as a kind of pet. At that moment, a car with a flashing blue light stopped outside. Kron had a feeling that meant trouble, and he hadn't found the key. He couldn't go home. He could almost cry. "I think it would be a good idea for you to go out the back way," said the little boy. "The police might not understand about the lorry." He grabbed Kron's arm. There was a flash. There was sudden darkness. Kron found himself whirling through space without the key. Magical lights flickered around him. The whole universe started to flash on and off, and a little voice behind him said, "Here, is this some sort of disco?" Kron reappeared in Grubble's cave. The wizard was busy applying woodworm killer to a very battered broomstick. There was a label on it which said, "A snip. This week's bargain. Only one owner, an old lady who only took it out on Halloween," in bright red lettering. With a slightly smaller pop, the small boy in the dressing gown appeared beside Kron. The wizard stepped back so suddenly he sprayed woodworm killer all up his sleeve. "What's that?" "He just followed me," Kron said miserably. "I think he's a magician. The place you sent me to was full of them. You've no idea." Said Grubble. Don't be frightened, little boy." "I'm not," said the boy, looking around the cave. "I know all about beaming people up and stuff like that. Is this a real magician's cave?" "Beaming people." "Yes, it is," said Grubble. "You may find it a little bit scary, but it smells of old socks." "What is your name, boy?" said Grubble, his eyes narrowing. "Apart from rude little nuisance, of course." "Alan," said the boy. "Alan Key." Kron looked at the wizard, who shrugged. "There's nothing to say the keys of Zag are ordinary metal keys," said Grubble thoughtfully. "They're magic, after all. They could be anything." "Does that mean we're stuck with him?" "Afraid so." "But I don't know anything about children," wailed Kron. "They're just people with short legs," said Grubble. "You give them milk and bicycles. You don't have to be afraid of them." "Put that down." "And they're like Dolls. A complete set of Star Wars characters, please, said Alan, poking at something nasty in a jar which blinked at him. Doesn't anyone clean up in here? I'm not going on another quest, said Kron firmly. I've been hit over the head, attacked by dragons, frozen, and nearly eaten by unpleasant people, and I'm going on strike. What have you got to say to that, hey? Only one thing, said Grubble. Well, span food. Kron vanished. Much to the wizard's astonishment, so did Alan. My magic must be better than I thought, he said. All right. We're on the 5th key. What do you guys think is going to happen? We have 10 pages left. What do you guys think is going to happen? Kron flashed into existence. Imagine his surprise to find that no one was shouting at him. The weather was nice. He was in a little wood. Birds were singing, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. He wasn't even too annoyed when Alan popped into existence a few yards away. Do you have to do a lot of this in your job? Alan asked. Too much, said Kron bitterly. The wood was on the top of a hill. In the valley, he could see several brightly painted tents around a large gray castle, and hundreds of people were milling about. I suppose we'd better go have a look, he said. I need a sword, though. I left mine in that dragon thingy. A lorry, corrected Alan. Yeah, dragon lorry, said Kron. Come on. There was some sort of fair going on in the valley, with stalls like rollagroat, bowl for an ogre, and duck witches in the moat, which is all rather boring, but better than having to wait for 1,000 years for television to be invented. Very true. At the center of the fair, though, was a wide, clear area with a big red tent in it. And in front of that, surrounded by a crowd of people, was a sword stuck in a stone. There was a message carved in the stone. In ancient mystical letters, it said, "Whosoever pulls this sword out of this stone will win a Spanish holiday for 2, the key of the castle, complete double glazing, and a cuddle toy." Kron and Alan read this. Kron said, "What's double glazing?" Alan said, "It's like extra glass in your windows." "Oh," said Kron, and said, "What's glass?" Various beefy types were climbing up the steps to the sword and trying to pull it out, urged on by the crowd. The sword didn't budge. An elderly magician with a pointy hat and regulation long white beard bustled up to them with a wad of forms. "Fancy trying your luck, young sirs," he said, handing Kron a form. "Just pull the sword and fame and fortune will be yours. Only 5 gold pieces to try." "What kind of cuddly toy?" Kron asked. The sword didn't look too bad, he thought. It could be worth having, especially if the cuddly toy was a decent one. "You get 3 goes," said the wizard encouragingly. "It's a fix," said Alan. "Have they got any video games here?" He wandered off. Alan soon got bored with the fair. There was no electricity and no buttons to press, and it had also started to rain. He wandered around to the back of the big red tent and peered inside. In front of the tent, Kron was being led up to the sword in the stone by a young lady with sequin tights, and the crowds were quite expectant. Kron, after all, had arms that looked like 2 sackfuls of melons. He might even manage to win the prize. "Okay," bellowed the old wizard to a microphone. The next contender is Kron the Barbarian. First try. Inside the tent, several other wizards were peering through a hole. He looks stupid enough, one said. What do you think? Beside him was a huge lever set into the ground and marked Ye Sword Release Mechanism. Let's see how he shapes up, said the smallest wizard. Can't be too careful. Kron gripped the sword and heaved. The crowd went silent. There was a long moment while the sword and Kron vibrated gently, and he gasped for breath. Hard luck, cried the old wizard. Now for the next try. Alan crept into the tent and hid behind a table, while the three wizards watched Kron's second attempt at pulling the sword from the stone. Big, strong, and stupid, one said. I say, let him pull it out. He can become king, and then he'll do what he's told. And we'll all be on the gravy train. Looks a bit willful, said the smallest wizard. It's risky, the storm in the stone dodge. Look at old Merlin. Thought he was made for life. Next thing you know, the lad gets ideas of his own and starts spending money on round tables and stuff. Second try, sorry, said the wizard on the stage. Let's give him a big hand, folks, and one more attempt. Kron spat in his hands and grasped the sword for the third time. I don't know, said the smallest wizard. Could be a troublemaker. So was Alan. He ran forward and pulled the sword release lever. The crowd outside gasped. So did Kron. The sword began very slowly to rise. Excuse me. The wizards looked around, shouted at Alan, and all three snatched the lever. The crowds gasped again. It looked as though the stone was pulling back. Unfortunately for the wizards in the tent, they were not very well organized and got in each other's way. Alan managed to pull the lever again. Outside, the sword began to come out of the stone for the second time. Kron's knees were knocking with the effort. Alan got a clip around the ear, and the lever was pushed back. The sword sank once more. Alan rolled under the tent flap and round to the stone, with a couple of the wizards after him. I said it was a fix, he yelled. Kron, they're holding it down. Well, folks, that's about enough for... began the old wizard next to Kron hurriedly. Kron took one hand off the sword and pulled the wizard's pointy hat over his eyes. Then he gripped the sword again, shifted his feet, gritted his teeth, and tugged. The sword rose. So did several yards of turf. There were horrible grinding noises underground, and various metal levers and cogwheels sailed into the air. The stone shattered, exposing a complicated arrangement of magnets. The sword was free. Okay, said Kron, advancing on the cowering wizards. What about the cuddly toy? And the key, said Alan. Come on, where's the key? The smallest wizard gingerly handed Alan a large black key. And the cuddly toy, said Kron. And the holiday and wherever it is, and double thingy glazing for my windows. He raised the sword threateningly. I think we'd better forget about that, said Alan. He wasn't sure how good swords were against magic, but the wizards were beginning to get over their shock, and it was just possibly not a good idea to hang around. Sure enough, the oldest wizard pulled his hat off, raised one hand, screamed a magic word, and sent a fireball hurtling toward them. Kron was so angry he wouldn't have ducked if Alan hadn't kicked his ankle. There was a sudden whooshing noise, and a broomstick hovered in the air next to them, with Grubble hanging on for dear life. Get on, he shouted. Come on, this isn't easy to control. I want fair and square, said Kron. I'm entitled. You'll be entitled to being a frog if you hang around. This is heavy magic coming down here, shouted Grubble. Finally, Kron jumped on. with Alan hanging on to the bristles. Surprisingly, since it was one of the broomsticks Grubble sold, it didn't snap in half. Instead, it dipped slightly and then tore across the ground with the wizard sending fireballs after it. People scattered out of the way, stalls were overturned, and finally the overloaded broom gained some height. 5 keys, yelled Grubble triumphantly above the rushing wind. Hold tight, off we go. There was an explosion of rainbow light, and the broomstick and its riders vanished. The broomstick, with Kron, Alan, and Grubble, the utterly untrustworthy, on board, flew silently through a tunnel of weird flashing lights and colors. So the tunnel from the chocolate factory? Where are we going precisely? Said Kron. Grubble didn't look round. It remains to be seen, he said. You mean you don't know? Said Kron. We're flying through all this. Quite good special effects, put in Alan. Yeah, quite good special effects, added Kron uncertainly. And, like, you don't even know where we're going to come out? Not exactly, no, since you put it like that, said the wizard wretchedly. I'm more sort of yes. I ought to tie you in a knot, growled Kron. It's only my magic that's keeping us going, said the wizard. Think you can fly this thing? No. Well, shut up then. The magic tunnel disappeared, and the broomstick swooped down over a desert landscape. Most of it was just sand, but there was a pyramid immediately below them. It was very big and incredibly old. The Great Pyramid of Zag, said Grubble, swooping down low for a better look. Very famous. One of the 9 fairly interesting wonders of the world, you know. 9 fairly interesting. Love it. What were the others? Asked Kron. Oh, nothing much, said the wizard. Hold tight. I'm going to try to land. Have you ever flown a broomstick, boy? No, said Alan. What a coincidence. Neither have I, said Grubble. Fortunately, the sand was quite soft, which was just as well. Not bad, that, said Grubble. Kron shook the sand out of his ears. The pyramid loomed in front of them. There was a big door, crusted with age and rust, but there was a keyhole. Well, said Grubble to Kron, here are the keys, and you've got the boy, so in you go, and I'll just sort of stay outside and sort of protect your rear, so to speak. Ow! Kron had grabbed his ear. No, he said, you come inside too, sort of, so to speak. What is the treasure exactly? Asked Alan. The legend says the treasures are the most valuable things in the universe, said Grubble. Yes, but what are they? Asked Alan. Grubble fished an ancient-looking book out of his robe. Here, he said, read what it says for yourself. Alan gingerly opened the book. It was very old and full of fiddly little pictures instead of writing. The wizard's fingers pointed at a page. Well, there's a picture of a house, sort of boat, a giraffe, a rabbit upside down, 2 half moons, and a wobbly thing with a hole in it, Alan said. So what? Ah, but that's hieroglyph, old picture writing, said Grubble. It means, and the great Zag said, in my pyramid are many treasures, but you may also find the most valuable things in the universe. Honestly, no kidding. I really mean it. Amazing, isn't it? Come on, said Kron. Hey, thank you, but no thank you. Sorry, we were having a Leonarding. Come on, said Kron. Unlock this door and let's get a crack at all this amazing treasure. The first key did unlock the door, and with some effort, Kron managed to open it. There was a long, dry passage inside. They came to two more doors, which Kron unlocked and pulled open. Absolutely nothing happened. No great stone balls rolled down. No trapdoors opened. There was an amazing lack of poisoned arrows shooting out of the walls. The next door had some picture writing engraved over the lock. It read, small rabbit, twiddly thing, bent tree, duck with hat on, two horses on a sort of bicycle, which Grubble said meant secret treasures right this way. Oh no, said Kron. Everyone will laugh at me when they hear about this. Grubble the wizard unlocked the fourth door, which swung back slowly. It revealed a large stone room with walls covered in picture writing. On a raised slab in the middle of the floor was treasure, breathed Grubble. He rushed over to it and fumbled through the piles of sacks and boxes. A deep voice from nowhere special said, will you take this and go? Or will you seek the most valuable things in the universe? Who said that? Said Kron. It wasn't me, said Alan. But we ought to go. Oh, we want the most valuable things, said Grubble, filling his pockets with diamonds. This is just small stuff. The door slammed shut. It was a heavy, dull sort of slam, the sort of slam that is particularly unpleasant when you happen to remember that the key is in the lock on the other side. Then someone started laughing. You probably know the sort of laugh. It came from everywhere. If you want the most valuable things in the universe, you'd better start looking, it boomed. P.S. The ceiling is coming down. We better look for the secret door, said Alan. The others stared at him. There's always a secret door, he pointed out. He and the wizard started banging on the walls. Kron didn't. The ceiling was already just below his head, or just above his head. He spat on his hands and tried to hold it back. There's no secret door, wailed Grubble. We're doomed. Try some magic, said Alan. And hurry up, muttered Kron, who was beginning to sag under the weight of the ceiling. I have. It won't work. There was a crack, and Kron disappeared. They crawled over to the spot where he had been. The ceiling was very low now, and saw him sitting in a tunnel some way below. You were standing on it all the time, said Grubble accusingly. Come on, give us a hand down. They hurried along a dark corridor, with Kron in the lead and the wizard lagging behind because of all the treasure he had stuffed, of course, into his boots, his hat, and every pocket. Suddenly, Kron stopped, stared hard at the floor. Then he snatched one of the gold bars that Grubble was carrying and tossed it into a slab a little way ahead. There was a nasty metal noise, ooh, and several rusty sword blades shot out of the wall. Nice chap, this Zag, said Kron, kicking the blades until they snapped. Come on. Alan grabbed his belt. If I was Zag, I'd set another trap just here, he said. People wouldn't be looking for it and would be caught. Good thinking, said Kron, and snatched another bar from the wizard. He dropped it onto the next stone. A dozen ancient spears dropped out of the ceiling and shattered on the floor. This Zag character has a lot of imagination, said Kron bitterly, looking at the spears. We've still got to find the most valuable things in the universe, bleated the wizard Grubble. Don't go dropping my... The rest of the sentence was lost to view as the slab he was standing on tipped up. There was a scream and a distant splash. Can you swim? Oh, can you swim? Kron asked Alan. I've got a grade 3 badge. What does that mean? It means yes. They jumped after the wizard and landed in deep, cold water. There was a spluttering noise as Kron surfaced, dragging an unconscious Grubble with him. It's all the treasure in his pockets. You sink like a stone, said Kron. Can you say anywhere to get out? I've just been an alligator and I think it's gone to get its friends. It's so cute. It's not cute, but been an alligator, why not? Alan found some slimy steps and they crawled out onto a dark ledge just above the water. A pitch black tunnel led upwards. Kron held the wizard upside down to let the water run out. Jewels bounced all over the ledge. Most of them fell in the water. Then they started up the tunnel, lost, soaking wet, and not happy at all. After a while, the tunnel leveled off and then started to go downhill again. Once or twice, Kron had to hack his way through thick tangles of spider web. Grubble woke up and started complaining about all the treasure they had taken out of his pockets to make him lighter to carry. Of course he did. We still haven't found this most precious thing that Zag kept going on about, he said. Anyone see anything that looks like it? It'll probably be gold. What's that rumbling? They looked around. Through the gloom, they could just make out a big stone ball, completely filling the passage, rolling down toward them. Oh, not that old trick again, said Kron. Come on, we're supposed to run. It's a dead end, said Alan. The ball was quite near now. Grubble, they both yelled. Do some magic. The wizard said, I'm not all that good at this, and stuck out a finger. Green light flashed from it, and there was a terrific explosion. Dust filled the air, and there was sunlight shining out through a hole in the roof. The stone ball had vanished. Come on, shouted Kron. We can climb up the rubble. In a few minutes, they were standing on the desert sand, with the pyramid quite some way off. Sunlight, freedom, and fresh air, said Kron. Now that's what I call treasure. He stopped and stared at Grubble, who backed away. The most valuable things in the universe, he snarled. That's what Zag meant. Oh, sorry, wrong voice. The most valuable treasure in the universe, he snarled. That's what Zag meant. You gave up all that treasure for fresh air, you toad. Alan sniffed. Worth it, though, he said. That's it. That's it, said Grubble, hiding behind the boy. Better out here than in those tunnels, eh? Anyway, we didn't lose it all, said Alan. He fished in his pocket and brought out 4 huge diamonds. The last thing that was heard, as the 3 disappeared arguing over the sand, was Grubble saying, Of course we can share them out equally. There's 2 for you 2, 2 for me too. And that's the end. And then, yes, that is it for tonight. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. We went almost an hour and a half. But, yeah, I don't know. I just thought the title was cool. And I think the story's cute. I enjoyed it. I hope you guys did too. Again, thank you. There's still at least 3 of you with me. That is awesome. But yeah, thank you for being with me tonight. Please go to the Hallowed Hearth podcast tomorrow night at 9. We have Christian Day on, who actually lives in Salem. Yeah. Rachel, who is on the show, is going to be joining us from New Orleans. And that is just the coolest. So we'll be living vicariously through her for a brief moment, which I told her we were going to do last night. So, yeah. And then Friday night, Trail Town in Yellow Springs. Come hang out with me and watch Tim and Todd and the Hitmen. And if I don't see you at any of those, I'll see you next Wednesday right here. Bye, guys.